All right, we're on. So, come on, Aaliyah. So, you want to introduce yourself first?
I'm Aaliyah, and I'm a student at Cameron Heights, and I'm currently in grade 11.
And she was in my grade 11 3 review course, which was a pretty innovative course at Cameron Heights where we embedded Psych, Social, and Anthro together with 3UI English. And so we had 2 periods a day where they got to spend time with me. And so I'm Jamie Rayburn-Weir, and I teach at Cameron Heights. And we did a really wonderful project in November. And so what we're going to do is we're going to tell you the story of it. As opposed to being a session where we talk about how to use the tools, I mean, if you ask Aaliyah, you just go on YouTube and Jamie Kasab said that this morning, that you just go on YouTube to learn how to use the tools. And I'm not trying to bash Michelle Armstrong's session before mine, not what I'm doing, but we're going to talk about more so how do you embed that in the classroom, and how do you embed it within your own, what you're already doing in the classroom, just to give a different experience. And so that's the plan with our talk today. And the other thing is that if you have questions or you have comments, please, I was joking with Aaliyah earlier that this is probably the most talking I'm going to do in front of a group, because it's not typically how I run my classroom. And so it's actually kind of funny that she's going to hear me talk more than she's probably ever heard me talk in one setting. So please interrupt us, ask us questions. That's what we're here for. We just want to share our story, but also help you guys out to think about how this could be really useful in your classroom as well. All right, so for us, one of the things that I really try to do from the teacher side is that I'm really big on the idea of collaboration and thinking about how do I run my classroom differently. So I teach English, and I feel so thankful to teach English because the overall expectations within the curriculum are so vague. And so they are. I'm not kidding. Realistically, I'm helping students enhance their writing, be able to speak in front of a group, and analyze and create media, as well as read and analyze literature. That's the goal at the heart of my class. And so instead of thinking about how do I do that to the students, I wanted to create an environment where the students want to do that for themselves. And so within that, instead of thinking about the classroom as something where I am the sage on the stage, that's not at all how we think about it. It's that we are equal learners on a journey. And so that's where kind of this idea comes from for me, is that, you know, when I think about my own personal experience with education, I hated university. I know everybody says it's the best time of your life. For me, it was the worst time of my life. I couldn't wait to get out of there and to do what I wanted to do and say what I wanted to say and think what I wanted to think, because I felt boxed in by what I had to do in university. And so I swore that that would never be my experience in the classroom as a teacher, and that students would hopefully feel like they actually were invested in what we were doing. And so thinking about the idea of collaboration is that everybody in the classroom has strengths and areas for growth, and how do we leverage those individual strengths and areas for growth, but also then how do we help everybody enhance those skills? And so at the heart of it, that's what we're looking at for us. So at the beginning of our semester, so this is a screenshot I took, or an image I took probably in October, I think, where one day we were talking about how do we create an experience, and we wanted to actually do something. Lots of times students do projects for our teachers and nobody sees it, and they do it so that it's just for their teacher and it doesn't really, they don't feel invested in it. And so we were talking about what matters to them. And within that, we had a huge discussion. It was a very collaborative, we used Google Forms to figure out what people were interested in. And we came to the idea that students are really passionate about changing how we run school because they don't like it. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, but your classroom is great, so it's okay. I didn't mind going this way too.
She doesn't have to say that either because she's not even in my class anymore.
For the record, I never skip her class.
but that's kind of the idea, is that we spent some time talking about what's important to you guys. And so they wanted to talk about what could learning look like in the future. And so we created this whole idea where we thought about what kind of skills do we have in the class, how do we get our message out. And so from that, we came up with this idea that we were going to run a panel discussion. We were going to stream it live on Google Hangouts on Air, and we were going to split up our class into different teams, and we were going to run an entire event. And ambitious, but awesome. So me putting my teacher hat on, thinking, okay, so I need to hit some curriculum expectations here. It's a double credit course. I'm looking for psych, soc, anthro, but I'm also looking for English. So English is fairly easy. I'm looking at oral communication. I'll explain there's some writing. Actually, there's a lot of writing involved in there. There's media production. There was lots of reading. So within that, English was covered. We were good to go. How did I make this relevant in terms of psych, soc, anthro? We were talking about globalization within that part of the curriculum. And so what we did, also thinking about the idea of, before we do this, I need to give them like a real chance to practice what we're going to do, because it's one of those things where, you know what, it could be like amazing, but it could be an epic fail if we don't actually practice this. Also thinking formative, summative. So with that, what we did was that we, the other thing I'm going to add in there too is that before any of this happened, and feel free to click on the link to media release, all the students in the class had their parents sign off on a media release. So this is just a copy of what they had to do, because they needed an additional media release from the board to be on Google Hangouts on Air, and to have to be just protected that way. So feel free to access that. So what we decided to do was that we're talking about globalization, and I started thinking about, what kind of connection do I have to the rest of the world? Well, one of the things is that when I was 14, we had an exchange student from Costa Rica live at our house for a year. Probably one of the single most transformative experiences of my life. And we still talk to them on a very regular basis. I've been to Costa Rica 4 times, which is awesome. It's a place to stay with all the best places to eat. It's fantastic. But, and so I sent them a message. I'm like, would you guys be interested in talking to my class? And they were so we talked to Alex, who is actually I call her my sister, but it's her husband, and he works at one of the airports in Costa Rica. And so he has a very global perspective, because he flies all around the world from Costa Rica. So we spent time talking. We used an inquiry model where the students came up with questions, and then coming up, you'll see there's links to the Google Hangout on Air we did with him, where we talked about globalization. We listened to what he had to say. We asked him questions. It was really cool to have that experience.
Yeah. And not only that, but like all the background work that went into this was a lot of class collaboration. Like we started off as a class where I didn't really know anyone. I probably only had a couple of friends in there, but then this turned out into a really free-flowing conversation where it wasn't even hands being put up anymore. People were just going off of others' ideas, and she no longer moderated our conversation, but the way that we were able to work together and actually listen to what others had to say and have that patience went really, really well.
And then we also tried to leverage our connections here in KW. And for us, so these are links to the videos that were streamed online. They're on my YouTube channel. If you see in the corner here, that's Alex Reese. He works for D2L, and he works in sales, and his role is to sell to Brazil. He is from Brazil originally, but he also spends time working with companies all over the world. So to have the education connection with D2L was pretty cool, but then also to have him tell us stories about what happens when D2L goes into countries and they break cultural norms. Bingo, we hit some really solid psych, soc, anthro expectations. But to have him tell the actual stories that are true based on their business, that they didn't anticipate, and that it was him sharing their learning along the way, so fascinating. So I think it was pretty cool for the students to be able to connect with these people. And so the message here behind this is that more than anything is that it was just me spending some time thinking about, who do I know that might be willing to talk to my students? Alex, I actually know because our daughters are really good friends and they dance together. Like he watched, like my husband was there today being dance dads. He's another dance dad. And we were talking one day while we were waiting for our kids while they were dancing. And I said to him, hey, would you like to do this? And he said, yeah, that sounds awesome. I'd love to share what we do. And so it goes back again to what Jamie Kasap was saying this morning, is that the idea of that people want to jump in and help, and they want to share what they know and what they learned. And so it was just phenomenal. Plus the whole KW tech connection is always a great thing to pump up within the school as well. I'm going to let Aaliyah handle this one because there's a really funny story that goes along with it.
Okay, this was Miss Weir's big conference that she went to in Niagara Falls. And so a couple days before her presentations, she came up to us and she said, okay guys, I want to implement you guys into my presentation using a Google Hangout. And we were all really excited, but the amount of work that had to go in through it was a lot. And so on the day of the presentation, we all got there a few minutes early, set up everything, and we had a tech crew, which dealt with setting up the Hangouts. And then we kind of had other people on the side just sharing their ideas. And so we had a supply teacher that day. And normally it started off fine, and then the presentation was about to begin. And we were having quite a few difficulties with, we couldn't hear what Ms. Weir was saying anymore, the connections, we couldn't really see what was going on. There was a lot of panic. And the supply teacher tried to calm us down. But she wasn't really doing it right, I don't think, because she didn't have much trust in us. And we were just a bunch of teenagers probably just throwing her off as to what we were doing. But we were being serious. And so watching her trying to give us little bits of control with what we were doing and trusting us seemed like a really hard job for her. But in the end, I think she built that. A lot of us were trying to walk out the door to go into the hallway where it was quieter. And she stood there and she's like, guys, no one else is going in the hallway. But we were all panicking because she's going on in about 5 minutes and she really needed us. So eventually we got out into the hallway, and then we found another problem where we didn't know what she was saying. Was she asking us any questions? And we're just sitting there all smiling like everything's going great, but everyone's running around through the halls. So maybe another reason why our teacher shouldn't have, our supply teacher, I thought we were really crazy. And then we finally figured out what she was saying, and we held the Chromebooks really close to her face. If you watch the video, you've probably seen me. I was asking my friends, like, where's the microphone? We're turning the Chromebook all the way around, trying to find it. And it was a really cool experience. It wasn't only funny, but we also got to, there was a lot of teamwork that went into it, where in order for me to say what I wanted to say, I had to help more people help me out with that. And so it's a great experience where I got to speak to other teachers again, where I could have my voice heard. And then also for Ms. Weir to have put that much trust in us meant a lot of responsibility for us. And it was a good way to teach us maturity within the classroom, and a lot of responsibility that goes through with that we have to give her the best because that's what she expected from us. So I was really thankful for this opportunity that she actually let us talk.
Yeah, because I really couldn't do anything. I was in Niagara Falls. And, but it was, from our end, it was awesome because the people in the audience were like, your students are doing that with a supply teacher? And I'm like, oh yeah, they're awesome. Like, they totally rocked it. But what came out of that is that when I came back on Monday, the tech crew in our class swarmed me. And they're like, Ms. Weir, we need a microphone because we couldn't hear you at all. And so it's in the tech group, and I'll explain a little bit more about them. There are these group of kids who maybe were my more disengaged students from class, but in that role, they took leadership, and they were the ones telling me, you got to buy a mic. And so that is what I did. I bought a Snowball mic, and that was them dictating the learning. So it was phenomenal for that to happen, which, I was so thankful that then they swarmed me when they came in the room. It was so funny, but for them to take away that. So with this slide, what we wanted to do is show you that these are some curriculum components. This was a conversation that we had within the class. What I wanted to do is draw your attention though to the last one, to communicate with peers and teachers about your personal learning goals instead of constantly following everyone else's learning goals set for you. And that was really interesting for me to think about. That was a student who wasn't in class that day when we actually did this task. And he added that in later. And it had me thinking a lot because we've been talking a lot about learning goals, success criteria, that kind of thing. And he paid attention because he saw the learning goal on my website every day. But it kind of bothered him that I was setting the learning goal for him. He wanted to own his learning and set his own learning goal. And so it was fascinating for me because he'd never verbalized that to me. And I happened to see this when I was checking out what people had added to the doc, and to see, and plus, like, if you use your Google Drive and you have the info section coming along the right-hand side, this is the best thing ever. I love that feature because it tells me when kids are editing the doc. And I happened to see that this kid edited the doc, and I wanted to see what he wrote, knowing he wasn't there that day. And so the fact then that he was talking about owning his learning was so awesome to see. But that he was kind of peeved that I was setting the learning goal for him. And so from then on in, he set his own learning goal for the class and was able to say what he wanted to learn for the day and what his goal was. And so I thought that was super interesting. Throughout our panel discussion, we had some tweeters, and so there's some tweets from our class embedded throughout the presentation. And so these are their thoughts, and I wanted to give them credit throughout the slides to have the idea that their voice is still being heard. And so that's what you'll see. So, and I know this is like super ironic that we're doing all the talking and like we put this slide up there. But within the class, this is talking about our tech group, and the link to the Google Hangouts on Air. If you want to know how to run a Google Hangout on Air, that link will tell you. It's really quite easy to follow and very explanatory. You can also YouTube it too, I'm sure, and figure it out. We played more than anything. We just kind of looked for it and set it up that way. But within the tech group within our class, I was so proud of those students. First of all, I love all my students. I feel so blessed to be a teacher, but within that group, the leadership that I saw come out was amazing. And from there, like, I saw them take control of situations and say, Ms. Weir, this isn't working. We need to do this. Ms. Weir, I want to go talk to our tech consultant in the class, in our school. We need to go talk to him because the tech that we have isn't working. We need to go confer with him. And so then I followed up with him after, and he said to me, those guys were awesome. They came down, they chatted with me, they knew what they wanted to do. They asked me questions that were really logical, and we worked it out. So to leverage those connections within the school, to have them go down and be really confident was so amazing because I had not seen that in other aspects. And so for me, I'm really big on triangulation of assessment. And so by using those times where they were coming up to me in something they were really engaged in and saying, Ms. Weir, we've got to do this because blah, 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 blah. And like, even though I use technology, I would say I'm not super techie. And half the time the students are like, hey, Ms. Weir, we can figure that out for you. They were the ones teaching me, and to see them meeting the oral communication expectation, where most of the time I couldn't get them to talk in class otherwise, was phenomenal. So the triangulation of data piece for this activity was such an important component.
Okay, so within the panel discussion, I was part of the moderator group, and amazing group. And it was a really long journey for me because we did this whole presentation for like over a month of planning, and a few things stood out to me whilst I was doing the moderating part of it. And one of the things was Ms. Weir and I would have side conversations. And during one of our side conversations, we realized, hey, I'm the only girl in my group, which stood out within my classroom because not very many girls were talking. And so for me to be in that group was like a major role for me because I was finally getting my chance to have my voice heard, because I realized that it's not always going to be easy for my voice to be heard. And this is one of the things that taught me personal learning, because I want to go into a field where I have to climb the corporate ladder. And normally for a female to do that, it's a lot harder. And so this gave me the experience of doing that. But also more inside the class learning was we got to talk to a lot of really nice people that I was really happy to meet. But the problem was is that they were older than me, and I had never presented to someone that was older than me, and so it wasn't necessarily intimidating. It was actually a really exciting experience, but I had to pay attention to how I was going to present now. And some of the things that I had to pay attention to myself was my body language. I had to use a lot of elevation of words and the language choices I was using. And one of the good parts was that I really enjoyed was the rebuttals on my thoughts that I had from a lot of the other teachers, where they would just they were pushing my thoughts and just questioning all my thinking and making me have to think deeper and deeper, which is what Ms. Weir has been trying to get me to do all year. And so this kind of gave me the opportunity to do it in a different way, other than having to write out all my responses. I was able to talk to someone about what I was thinking about. And so that really helped me with my self-growth and presenting skills, which is probably the only reason why I'm here today is because of this whole thing that we did, because I would have never been able to do it. And so within all of that, we also had to do a lot of teamwork and collaboration because I wasn't in a group. It wasn't personalized learning. I had to learn how to work with other people, which sometimes isn't the easiest thing to do as a student. And I was in a group with a lot of male voices that were really strong and they were always being heard. But the problem was that we were all trying to talk at the same time and nobody's voices were even being heard and nobody's ideas were getting across. And so it all started off as a joke at one point. This is the funny part of the story, where there was a kid in my group and he got up during one of our meetings and everyone else was sitting down. And at one point he started talking, sharing his ideas. And one of the students said, "Why are you standing up? Why are you putting yourself superior to us?" And so he was offended and he sat back down. And then afterwards, my friends were watching our group, how we were communicating, because we were one of the main groups. And they're like, "Hey, Leah, as a joke, why don't you stand up next period and see what they have to say to you?" And surprisingly, I did that. And I didn't have any comments. They didn't say a word to me. And I was laughing. My friends were making eye contact with me and they're laughing at me because they realized I haven't started yelling yet and they haven't started yelling yet. So things are still going well. And it helped me to realize I had to put myself in that playing field with them where I had to be able to have my voice heard. But also by doing that, I kind of took on a leadership role within there where I started communicating and moderating throughout our moderator group. And I got the opportunity to talk to them. And this way our ideas were being talked about better and our whole flow of our group went so much smoother and we were finally getting work done. So Miss Weir wasn't as anxious that we weren't going to be ready in time. And but not only that, but when I stood up to that role there, some people started to feel more comfortable with the way I was doing things. And so some people in the group that weren't talking before, they started talking to me and sharing their ideas. And so I feel like their mindset with the teamwork changed. It became more positive and our productivities level went up. And it was a great experience from that, to know that I could make a difference within my group, which made me feel really good about myself. And so that was a really cool part of it. But the one thing that I realized is being a leader, I would have never been able to do it and never have my group's trust if I didn't follow a quote, which was, the quote was, "You have to listen with the intent to understand and not the intent to only reply." That was a quote that I found, and that's the quote I followed all year long as being a leader. Because as a leader, your job is not to stand up there and tell people what to do and be egotistical about the amount of power that you have now. What you have to do is you have to listen to what other people want in your group and how you can help them with it. And as soon as I started doing that, my group started coming up to me for the feedback and what thoughts they should get from me or where they can have improvements. And so I feel like that was a really big self-growth for me, to realize that that's all I had to do was to listen to what somebody else had to say to make myself feel good and to help myself learning. And because of this whole experience, I got to move on to so many other things, which is completely mind-blowing to me, because in grade 9 and 10, I was the quietest girl you would find. I would never put up my hand every time a report card comes home. Aaliyah gets like an N or a satisfactory on the learning goals because she never participates. My parents are like, "Come on, Aaliyah, you gotta talk. You have to say something." But because that's where I finally had my opportunity to have my voice heard and realize it would make a difference because I had people listening to me, I'm now talking, but I haven't figured out within myself a self-growth as to where I broke out of the shell of being a shy person to such an extroverted person. I'm not sure where that happened, but I'm still really happy that it happened. So I had really good experiences from this. And I have just so much to say. If I could do it again, I definitely would. Not only because I got to learn about myself, but because it was different kinds of learning in the classroom that was going on. I got to play to my strengths and show my teacher where I was really good. But at the same time, not only was I doing my job there, but I got to help a lot of the other groups and see what they were up to. I'm not a really strong writer, but once I took on that leadership role, our other groups started coming up to me and saying, hey, can you edit this for me? And for whatever reason, I don't know why they trusted me with their piece of writing when they'd probably get a better mark than me. But I felt a lot better about that. Now knowing that I had all these people that were helping me out with my learning, and I was helping them with their learning, and there was just so much collaboration going on within the classroom. And the cool part about it was that we did it all ourselves. Miss Weir kind of sat on the sidelines, and she put the entire project into our hands. And she trusted us running the Google Hangout and asking the questions. And in the end, how it all happened and the way we presented it went really, really well. So that was, she's probably really impressed with us. And that's really what we want, was to prove to her that she can trust us with whatever project she wants to throw at us.
I don't think I could have, I can add anything to that. So. All right, so what I wanted to do is also chat a little bit about the other groups. This was a group that the students decided that they wanted to take minutes of the panel discussion, and I'll explain more about the panel itself coming up. We actually have 2 panelists in the room. It's awesome. And so they decided that throughout the hangout, yes, we were going to have video of it, but they also wanted to take like documented notes so that they could go back, and that was the role they chose. But within it, we also embedded other tasks. And the minute taker group, their task was that they had to write a letter to our panelists. And within this, this was some of, like, I'm so thankful for this because I got to spend a lot of time in the iteration stage of the writing process, because what we ended up doing is that these students said to me, can you help us? And we spent like good portions of time talking about language choice, talking about sentence structure, talking about how do you portray yourselves to the audience, because what they were really concerned with was that we have Mark Carbone, Donna Fry, Dean Sharesky, like Brenda Sherry. These are important people in the world, and they were worried because they weren't just writing for me, because they're like, oh yeah, you know us, you know what our skills are. They were writing for people that they really wanted to sound sophisticated and make a really strong first impression. And within this, I thought, like, I couldn't have done anything else in the classroom to give them the time to work on this skill. Did you want to add something, Donna?
No, I'm just embracing it. That's all. I'm listening with the intent to tweet.
And at the end of the day, I don't think they were actually completely satisfied with what they had written, because they were like, but we were running close to a deadline, and there was accountability because November 17th was the day, and they needed to make contact with our panelists before it happened. And so just the opportunity to have that much time to spend working on one skill that was definitely for many of them their area for growth within the English curriculum. And so that was really phenomenal.
Oh, you meant about the actual letters that
we
received? Oh my gosh. Let's just say communication within the ministry isn't like that at all. They were beautiful. They were beautifully written.
Oh,
it's just,
thank you.
I think what you mentioned, Ellie, about feeling like your voice mattered, I think that the letters that we received made us feel like our voices mattered to you. And I think that was, for me, that was the really important piece. I thought, wow, because I do talk to a lot of adults all the time that really have no interest. So to get a letter from students who were really curious and interested in what we had to say was no, it doesn't happen very often.
Yeah.
They were beautifully written.
Yeah, within this group, some of the kids, they were kind of like the tech group where they didn't do much talking. But within this, sometimes Miss Weir is busy with other groups, and so they actually made that step where they knew it was so important that they would go up to other groups or other people and just ask for that feedback that they really, really needed. So that you know, what words can I use? My only feedback, because I'm not that good at writing, was open thesaurus and just find big words to use. Because that's what I always do.
That's great.
So with the discussion advancers group, they were their task was that they were going to come up with aspects that they were going to add to the Twitter conversation that was going to happen as another layer of our discussion. So we were going to have the panel that was speaking and that Aaliyah and her teammates were moderating, but we were going to have a Twitter conversation happening as well. And so their task was to come up with interesting images that would spark some conversation, and they were going to facilitate an online conversation as well. And I was so proud of them. They did a really awesome job. They also covered the media curriculum, a media component, and I'll show you their video because I want to give them a shout out because it was phenomenal what they created in like 2 days. Wrote the script, filmed it, and then and through multiple versions as well. Uh-oh, that's weird. I'll try again. Maybe it's because I had it up already.
Admit you're late. Another note? I didn't even get the one from yesterday. Do you get this? I honestly don't even know what to do. Okay, class, don't forget, this is your homework for tonight. I expect it to be done by tomorrow. Seriously, all that in one night? I'm also handing back last week's test. Oh my gosh, how did I do so bad? I studied for so long. My parents are gonna kill me. Well, this was pure luck. What'd you get?
Tests, assignments, quizzes. Education is about giving students the opportunity to learn new things and expand their knowledge. So how can we enhance our current education system to make it more enjoyable, interesting, productive, and self-driven? Join our panel discussion on November 17th at 9:35 a.m. to discuss these issues and input your ideas.
So they were tasked with sharing what was our panel discussion going to be about. And I think they knocked it out of the park.
Oh my gosh.
With the humor, with what they said. It was phenomenal. And they did it in like 2 days. It was amazing. So just to have them create that, plus then the way that they engaged the Twitter audience that they had going was phenomenal. So it was, I can't say enough good things about what they did. And more than anything, it blew my mind in terms of expectations. You know, I was pretty pleased with what I thought they were coming up with. When I saw the final product, because I saw them in process, I tried to give a little feedback here and there, but when I saw the finished product, they were so proud too. That it was awesome. So these are some examples of things that tweets that they used throughout the panel discussion. And we talked a lot about giving people credit. So you'll see they found Twitter handles. And that was a whole other layer with another group spending time researching our panelists. So they did some digging online, trying to dig up dirt. No, I'm just kidding. There's no dirt online. But it was amazing what they found because we spend our time using, there's our media analysis strand of curriculum, where they were like, hey, Miss Weir, did you know that Mr. Carbone said this? And I was like, no, I did not. And then they were like, that Mr. Sharesky guy wears weird pants. Sorry, Dean. But then they were also like, and he likes to jump a lot. And I'm like, and they're like, and he has so many Twitter followers. How does he do that? So, but like it opened the door to so many interesting conversations because they were the ones doing the learning and they were investigating these people. But I was so proud of them for the way that they took little snippets from the conversation from the verbal conversation to further the digital conversation. With using the hashtag that they came up with, it was amazing. There's some more too. I also wanted to point out that I put this one in because Donna was a very active tweeter throughout, but that was a question that Aaliyah asked within the conversation. And just to give you guys some kind of idea of what we were talking about, they came up with the questions. One of the links within the presentation has the discussion advancers, what they were saying, what they wanted to ask about, and that kind of thing. So I didn't really want to go into those details. You're welcome to investigate and take a look and see what you find there. But it was such a cool experience to have them putting their ideas out there for the world. So I wanted to give you some ideas from my perspective, because truly, as Leah said, I kind of was on the sidelines, and not necessarily on the sidelines that like I didn't help, because I don't want to give you that impression. I was so tired at the end of those days because I had this class 2 periods, and so I was on my feet the whole time, from group to group to group to group to group, giving feedback, helping them out, pushing their thinking, that kind of thing. But I was not the micromanager saying like, you need to do this. That was on them. That they were within their group knowing what their expectations were. That was on them. That they were moderating themselves to make sure that they held up their end of the bargain. Because one of the things I hear so many teachers complain about is that we have no deadlines. Well, we had a deadline because this was happening on November the 17th at 9:35, and they needed to be ready. There was a hard and fast deadline there, and but what I really appreciated was that by putting trust in them, they rose to the occasion. Every group was ready to go. Every group was excited. Every group was engaged, and personally being able to have so many really interesting conversations with each student and focusing on that some of them needed the help in writing, and so we focused on writing for that. One of the things I pegged about Aaliyah right off, like at the beginning of my course, was that I saw a lot of leadership potential within her. And with doing this task, I thought to myself, okay, I need to make sure that I'm spending some time really trying to coach her on how to be a strong woman, how to have a voice. She had some strong voices in that group, but at the same time, then helping her see that she has that potential all inside herself, and that is getting her to, just by having side conversations with me in the hall about how did that go, and having a reflective time where we debriefed. That was probably the best component of the whole activity, was watching them grow as learners. And like, she totally blossomed, which is, I saw a huge change in her within the classroom, confidence level and willing to participate and to lead. And I think that when you spend a lot of time like looking for those like real world skills, then and providing an experience where they can do that, and trusting that they're going to rise to the occasion, that's what we should be aiming for in education, is not necessarily the idea that we're drilling tests into them or drilling facts into their head, but providing an experience for them to engage in this kind of learning. You can read my blog post up there. That's what the link is up there. It has a lot of a summary of what happened in there. And on the next slide, there are links to Donna's reflection and Mark's reflection. Donna created a storify of all of the tweets of the day. And so with that, do you want to add anything in terms of reflection?
Well, I thought it was a really interesting experience from the panelists' point of view as well. I mean, we had a bit of a chance to chat about this at lunch today. And I think it was so interesting to bring, in an unrehearsed way, a set of really well-developed questions for people to debate and present their points of view. But there was great interaction, I thought, between the panelists. And for me, I really appreciated the work that had gone into preparing an opportunity where a classroom could make connections with people interested in changing education. So yeah, it was fabulous.
Did you want anything?
I think when you explained how the class did it as a project, because I've gone into classes before to just do Google Hangouts. This was very different because it was completely run by the students. And when you explained to me how one team was looking after this and another team was looking after that and another team, and I realized how it was an entire class project that they designed. It was just amazing to be part of, just amazing to watch that we were talking about the future of education while we were experiencing the future of education. And this being able to be here at Talk to Elliott right face to face like this, it just kind of really puts a finality to the project, makes me understand it so much more clearly, and have the personal reflections that you shared today and see the growth that's happened for you really helps me understand what's more important in education. So when I continue my work, that will impact the kind of work that I'm doing. I also wanted to tell you that Miss McMillan, who was your teacher at your public school, I think, has said hello on Twitter.
Oh, really? I met her in the hall. Hey. She's probably laughing because I never even participated in her class. So.
Well, you were talking about how you were always getting that N for that part. I was thinking about her and how she would be so proud of you now to see the change. And so I think that I have probably learned more from the experience than the students. I'm not saying that qualitatively, but I just wanted to explain how much I learned from being involved in the entire process of your learning and how that will impact the learning of other classrooms as I do my work in the office going forward. So I thank you for the opportunity. Thank you for choosing me to be on the panel. It's been a life-changing opportunity for me as well.
Thank you. That's awesome. One of the things that happened post the panel, so we hosted the panel, it was like an hour long. The students asked questions to Mark, to Donna, to Brenda Sherry, Karen Butler, Jeff Williams, and Dean Shareski. So we had a 6-person panel, and it was phenomenal. People just jumped in. It wasn't scripted, so that this person was answering this question. It wasn't scripted. This person was answering this questions. The panelists had the questions in advance, but it was just a free-flowing conversation, and that was a student choice. They didn't want a scripted because they felt it was forced. They wanted a natural, organic conversation. But post panel, a colleague I went to university with that we've connected on Twitter sent me a tweet saying, "Hey, I saw what your students did, your class. That was awesome. Do you think your class would give me some feedback?" Because he was going to be doing a presentation to a group of, I think, middle school students, I think is what he said. And he's an elementary teacher. And so he said, "You know what? I'm looking for some more mature feedback because I don't want to sound too juvenile and I don't want to talk down to them. And I saw what you guys did and that you're willing to share. And so is it okay if I can connect with you guys one day?" So we held a Google Hangout, and what was really awesome was that he showed us his slide. He had an RSA Animate he had done, but what he wanted to hear true and honest feedback. And so we often talk a lot about like being constructive, but also being kind and caring, because you want to make sure that you're giving good feedback that's going to help the person improve, but you also don't want to destroy them. And not that they're worried about destroying another teacher, but it's just an important skill to have when you're an effective collaborator, is that you can say, "No, I disagree with you." And so within this, we had a 15-minute Google Hangout with Derek Rogenizer from a school in Ottawa. And he asked us for our honest feedback. And it wasn't me really talking. I was like, "Hey, Derek, how are you?" And then he talked to them and they gave him honest feedback about, there were a couple of things they didn't like about his presentation. And they gave him some ideas of how would you make it more engaging for students. And so that was so unexpected because we totally we didn't anticipate something like that happening. But I think when you put yourselves out there, then you have the opportunity to, you never know who's watching or who's listening. And usually people say that in a super creepy way. But it's amazing because you can make connections. And I think that, I don't know that the students truly understood how cool that is, that he wanted to hear what they had to say. And then he used their feedback, and then he did his presentation, but he also was interviewed by a radio station and gave us a shout out on their air. So it was pretty cool. But I think that that when you put yourselves out there, that it's truly amazing what can come back to you. So we have done enough talking. What we wanted to do is we wanted, this was like an all-encompassing project within the school or within our class, very student run. But we know that everybody runs their classroom in their own way, and that depending on what you do in your classroom, there's many ways that you can make this. You can use Google Hangouts on air to connect with people, to provide opportunities for students to have an authentic audience. So what we were looking for is that we want you guys to spend a few minutes thinking about, what does this look like in your classroom? How could you leverage the connections that you have? Look for experts in the area of the discipline that you're in, and then how could you incorporate some of these ideas within your own classroom? Because I'm always looking for other ideas as well.
Well, I know one thing for sure was when we did this whole experience was that Miss Greer didn't give us any boundaries. And when she didn't give us those boundaries, she let us explore wherever we wanted to and what we wanted to and what we wanted to talk about. She didn't specifically, even with our topic, she didn't tell us we had to talk about the future of learning. We could talk about many other things. But because she didn't give us that boundary, she let us explore our interests, which gave us more of a motivation to actually participate in the project and do what we wanted to do, as if she had told us, this is what you have to do, and this is how you're going to do it.
Any ideas of? Go ahead.
I'm working with a couple colleagues on a project that relates to math and collaboration. So it's not quite the same line, but we're trying to link up with the international school in Bangkok.
That's awesome.
We're trying to share. First, we're trying to link up as like math buddies, right? We've been doing it within our own school, where these grade 8 students are mentoring some
that's awesome.
younger kids, and we're using Google Classroom as a platform to share. So we're just in the midst of trying to link up these two classes, our class and the younger kids in Thailand and Bangkok. But the time difference is obviously a factor. So the on-air thing doesn't exactly work, but
if you record your video, so like I'm running a Google Hangout on air right now.
yeah.
So it's running live on my YouTube channel. When the Hangout is done, the video's there. So you could set it for privacy settings, I'm guessing will be important.
Yes.
You can set it to be a private with the link.
Yeah.
And so you can then share the link with the teacher,
Right.
and they could go back and forth that way.
So and I mean, we're looking at different ways. There's different levels of sharing. So we're like, if you have the parent letter and you're up for sharing, so we're trying to get a math problem that will be scalable for a grade 5 class and a grade 8 class.
Oh, that's
around
awesome.
Fractions and some of the stuff they could share in solutions, and then our guys might act to start as the older mentor, saying, hey, this is how we might share that, or I like how you did this. But in that, sort of really building their communication skills in math and problem solving through different things and sharing a solution is the idea. The big idea is that we can use these kind of connections to engage kids in math and hopefully improve learning. So,
That's awesome.
So that's something we're trying to do, but a little different in this, but this is obviously awesome.
Thank you. That's awesome. Anybody else want to share?
So we have a project. It's actually Julie's class and the class in my board in Markham. And so I created a lesson on tolerance in Canada. And because it had an FNMI lens, I felt like it wasn't really fair to put it out there for our teachers unless we had sort of a real perspective. So I connected with Julie, and we just know each other through Twitter, and they agreed to run the lesson. So both schools taught the lesson, jump in anytime, taught the lesson, added layers and layers and layers to the lesson. So it was an amazing, I think, really rich lesson. And then connected via Google Hangouts. And our first created questions to ask one another. And I actually got that idea from your other project, right? Like, so how do they what misconceptions might they have about each other? What assumptions might they be making? And that's really important when we're talking about a cultural perspective. So they exchanged questions, and the kids agreed that these questions would be okay to ask one another. And then they had their first meeting. And it's funny because when we were done, the students and teachers said, you have opened up a whole new world for us. They are going to continue the conversations. We've really just begun. We have, we got to know each other, but really the main theme of this is, what does reconciliation look like? A Catholic school and a First Nations school. So we're really excited about what it's going to look like. But the kids really do feel like this isn't just a lesson in a textbook anymore. This is real, and this is important. So.
Goosebumps. That's awesome.
And so from our end, what the important part, the part that the students are really connecting with, the class is a theory of knowledge class, the more Catholic class, and so they were studying Indigenous knowledge systems. So the thinking was, well, they're studying the theory of it, and what we did for a week was common background knowledge. So we all read similar text, viewed similar text, and listened to similar text, and then we did the questions. But instead of just understanding the theory of it, it was to ask First Nation students about their lived experience of Indigenous knowledge systems. And we didn't get there. The Google Hangout only got as far as sort of introductions and some of the cursory questions and the kind of questions that have to be asked and answered about the lived, the negative lived experiences, the reason why we're here in the first place in the this post-residential era, this post-TRC, Truth Reconciliation era, why what happened, and what was the consequence. So the students really needed to hear from each other about those stories, those personal stories of hardship. And but the students are chomping at the bit to get back in conversation about what they have to offer in terms of what does Indigenous knowledge systems look like in my life. And so they're anxious to share that.
Oh, amazing. So amazing.
It's powerful because they're not often used to having talk about having your voice heard.
Yeah.
Right. So they're very excited to be at the center of a really positive and powerful conversation.
Yeah, it's cool because like I was telling Miss Weir that I can't learn in a classroom setting where it's just textbooks and someone just lecturing to me what to do. I have to actually go out there and experience it for myself to know. And not only does it help me in high school, but it gives me an insight into my future as to, what it's like to do these things with different people. So.
That's a really good comment. Yeah, that's a good observation.
Did you want to add?
Well, I was just going to show that in my class, I was lucky enough to be chosen to participate in the Arts for Learning program with our board this year, which is where my class, being an elementary class compared to a high school class, my class sort of gets seen as the client, and we get to develop or sort of start our own little startup, and we develop our own app idea, and then the high school class we are part of is the coding and programming to actually generate the app. And my class came up with the idea because it has to be a learning tool. It's not just a game, it has to be a learning tool. So I just left it open with a bunch of curriculum documents out and links out, and they generated the idea for where they saw perceived need for learning support in grade 1 to 5. And very quickly, it was within the first 2 days, my class said we need to actually speak to students in those grades in order to be able to identify exactly whether or not this is a need and whether we remember it correctly. So there was that, older younger student connection there happening already. They call it their market research, which is very authentic for them. But then now I see, even like we've now met with our service provider, our grade 11 class, but I see lots of opportunities where we can take this even beyond, I call it our 4 walls, even though it's a whole lot more than that already. You know, one group is doing some science-related learning, and we could easily connect with our, you know, virtual Xerox, whatever, and really see the virtual researcher on call. You know, other people are doing ancient civilizations, and you know, I could connect with an old history professor. Like, I see how we could take that so that my class, being a service provider, should be an expert on the idea of their app, but they need to become those experts and not just be making an expert, so they have to make those connections even further. And I think that can just make it even that much richer, I think.
This is not an answer to your question, but it's a concern that continues to come up. So Ellie, you talked a lot about learning to understand people at the table, to have to be a moderator at the table, these skills of teamwork. And you were mentioning that, you know, investigating having empathy, right? Design thinking. It's fantastic to see that happening in schools. I know Heidi Siwak, who's now with the Ministry of Outwards with Hamilton Wentworth Board, has a concern that we as adults in our work environment don't work that way. We don't have those skills. And students are acquiring these skills and aren't going to want to work with us. They really are. They're going to go somewhere else because like, we just don't understand how to work in that way. And so it leads to a really interesting idea of society where we're teaching our students to be these empathetic, design thinking, integrative thinking, amazing people. And we need to learn some skills from you. So maybe there's a startup, right? Teach adults these skills. But it's an interesting read. If you have a moment to read her blog post, it's a very interesting read about how her work environment is so different from her classroom where she's teaching those skills because she doesn't see it in the adult.
Yes.
We just wanted to end off with on a like super hopeful note. Dean, you know what, and that's funny because that is the screen capture on YouTube. But what he said here, I think, is truly just the epitome of what we can do as educators and learners. So we're just going to share a clip from it.
Question: why is it that you have this freedom outside, not inside? I mean, the simple answer to that is access. So when I was your age, I didn't have quick and easy access to all the information that you have today. I couldn't pursue my interests in the same way that you can. Television was largely an entertainment medium. Newspapers would give you a little bit, and then you had libraries, and then there was school where you really had a chance to dig deep. You don't have those restrictions anymore. You can learn whatever you want, whenever you want. And so that glaring dichotomy between what you do on the outside and what happened on the inside didn't exist for all of us. We didn't have that dichotomy. It's really hard for you to kind of get how that was. And yet, so schools are still sort of in the mindset of that dichotomy that you got to come to school to learn stuff, and you don't. You absolutely don't. And so I think one of the real great questions not only is what the purpose of school is, what's the advantage of school, right? It's not information. That is not what schools have that they don't have. What they have is human beings. They have people in a room together. That is the unfair advantage of schools today, is the bus will drop off hundreds of children every day to one place. That's a huge advantage that we have to figure out, wow, what can we do with all these kids in a room together who have lots of needs, who have lots of interests, who have lots of abilities? What can we do with them? And because if you don't get that, then all of you might say, you know what, if all this is about is learning English or learning math, I might as well just stay home, take the whole thing online, and not bother with spending time in school. So school's charge is not only figuring out their purpose, but also figuring out the fact that the big advantage they have is they got kids. And so what do we do with kids? So that's where it goes back to this whole notion of social learning has to be at the heart and core of it, because that's what you have to get that you can't do if you stay at home and just do it in front of the screen.
And so with Dean's really insightful idea, thank you for attending our session.